This is one of my favorite kinds of interviews because so often I get to speak to interesting people about the great ideas that they're hatching, and then they leave and we're left wondering, I wonder whatever happened next. Did they do that? Did it all happen? And today I get to sort of close the loop on one of these stories as I welcome back to the studio Alba Brunt, who is a South African parent whose children were exposed to the Green School in Bali, Indonesia several years ago. And when we last chatted in early 2018, she told us about a vision of starting a branch of the Green School here in South Africa. How wonderful to receive an email earlier this week telling me that she's done it. She's turned that vision into reality with some help from a lot of other people. Ground has been broken on the new school premises, and the first intake of pupils will happen in January 2021. I'm specifically not saying anything about heading into a classroom because this is a school very unlike the others that you're used to. Alba, it's lovely to have you with us back in studio today. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Pippa.
And also with us, Andy Wood, who is going to be the principal of the Green School South Africa, and Chris Thompson, who's the current head of the Green School in Bali. Lovely to have both of you with us as well. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Chris, let me maybe start with you for the big picture and the international picture before we drill down into what's happening here in South Africa. For the sake of those who didn't hear that interview in 2018, can we just revisit the idea of what the Green School is all about?
Well, the Green School is a holistic, integrated learning program, and we have parents who come from all over the world. We have 40 different nationalities who come to our school, and it has an environmental and a sustainability focus. And it's really trying to change the narrative around education by addressing the whole child, not just their head, but also the heart and their spiritual aspects.
Do those children tend to stay with you for their whole high school career, primary school career, or do they come for a little while and then move on back to their country of origin? What's the typical model? We
get little people who come in at the age of 3. They go all the way through the age of 18. Most people think they're coming for 1 year, maybe 2 years, but once they get to Bali, they see the school, they see how happy their kids are and the positive impact of what's happening, they stay much longer. So we have people who are staying 5, 6, 7 years now, and I'm also a parent, and we've been there for 10 years now.
Okay. I know you opened in 2006. I'm intrigued to hear your story personally because, Chris, I believe you were a Silicon Valley entrepreneur before this. How did you get from there to here?
Yeah, I started in a Silicon Valley startup with a video game company and spent 23 years with them. I got tired of the corporate world. I needed to get out. We met John Hardy, the co-founder of Green School, over dinner one night. We're driving home and my wife says to me, "Why don't we go there?" So we literally packed up, left the corporate world, moved down to Bali. We were going to go for 1 year, and it's now 10 years later, and we're still there, and our 2 kids just love it there.
So, Chris, I mean, you talk about a sort of a holistic approach to education, educating the heart as well as the mind. A lot of people hear the words Green School, they think, okay, this is going to be a very environmentally focused school, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it? It's not just about the natural environment and how we respect it and treat it. You're also very much about approaches to cross-cultural relationships, how we listen to one another. Just expand a little bit on that aspect.
Yeah, well, I think what's important is that the idea of green really goes back to, planting trees, having a garden, those things. But the idea of Green School is looking at the world through a green lens. So you can look at history through a green lens. You can look at political relations through a green lens. How do we treat each other? How do we get along with each other? So there's an aspect of kindness and empathy and understanding and discourse and dialogue that goes along with the program. So it goes well beyond the idea of just around, say, environmental sustainability.
I mean, I love the idea of speaking to the whole child's education. It's very topical, I think, that we're having this conversation this week for 2 reasons. One is that after you guys leave, I'm going to be dialing into Davos to speak to one of our young climate activists from South Africa who's gone there trying to have that sort of wake-up moment of people saying we need a different way of looking at the world and how we interact with it. The other is that, of course, it's back to school here in South Africa. We're hearing horror stories of initiations and outdated traditions that need to go. And I just think it's so pertinent that we take a fresh look through a fresh lens at the idea of what it means to educate a child. Alba, let me bring you in here. How did you find yourself integrating into this concept of what the Green School thinks is the way to educate a child?
So when we went to Bali, we thought it's going to be this adventure and we're going to have a family adventure, and we didn't expect that the education would be so different and that it would make you reevaluate what it is that your child goes through every day. Why do they look grumpy and sad and sometimes angry and really just hungry when you pick them up from school? And what is it that make them really jump with joy and want to return to the school the next day? So our understanding of education and just having a completely different approach to it was very much confronted by that experience. And now our challenge is, how do we take what has been learned in Bali over the last 11 years and make it the South African experience?
So you said to me 2 years ago, we want to make it happen. We've identified a space in the Pearl Valley where we think it might work. There was a lot of work to be done. Tell us what's happened in the intervening 2 years, Alba.
A lot. So, yes, we've got the land. We've done the designs of it. And Pippa, it is so lovely to see a dream turning into a little bit of reality this far. I mean, we don't have the campus yet and the buildings are not standing there yet. We're starting with it, but we do have the plans. We've got the website. We've got a head of school. We've got parents that are interested in coming to the school. So a lot of work has been done into the groundwork of how does regulations work? What do we need to do to get a campus in the ground? The design, how do we create the iconic campus, something that is just really spectacular and that changes your mind when you walk in there, that you have a different idea of what is possible in this space. And then thinking about, what is it that we can do with this piece of land that is really different and unique and is wholesome. So we plan to plant an amazing edible garden and feed everybody from the garden. So designing that garden and using permaculture principles in it. And then, how many olive trees do you need? So how much olive oil are you going to use, and how do you translate that into how many olive trees you need and where we're going to plant them and how we're going to get them and all of that.
Detail. Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Which is all really important. Andy, let me bring you in here, because Andy is Andy Wood, the principal of the school to be. A lot of parents would be going, that's wonderful. I love the idea of an imaginatively designed school. I love the idea of the veggie garden, but I also want to know what my kids are going to learn there and where you slot into the South African educational landmark. In terms of registration, government, private, or how... Where are we in that regard?
So this will be an independent school. We will have a curriculum. You will study languages and mathematics and science and so on. So there will be a rigorous curriculum that at a base point will touch all the cardinal points of the South African curriculum.
Okay.
Plus a whole lot more. And it's very much about how we go about teaching things. So to pick up on Alba's talking about the gardens there, we're going to have some tomato plants and we're going to grow the tomatoes and the children are going to harvest them and use them in their lunchtime meal. There's also opportunities to teach their biology and mathematics and poetry, and to start with the real world and then to move to the concepts. So instead of saying, right, morning everybody, open your textbooks, turn to page 24, exercise 19. Now, where were we yesterday? To say, we've got tomatoes. And fantastic. How many tomatoes have we got here? Would you estimate we've got less than 10, more than 100? And to be able to approach all your teaching from an experiential point of view. Asking real questions, getting children to think critically about the concepts that they're learning. At the end of it, they will have mastered mathematical concepts and literacy and numeracy, but it's much more about asking those questions, teaching them to... what are the good questions to ask? How will you set a hypothesis that would test those questions? How would you know if your answers are correct? How would you evaluate them? What went wrong? What can we learn from the mistakes we made? How can we then correct things for the next step in the learning journey? Because mistakes are such an important part of the learning journey. So yes, it'll be a more organic and hands-on approach. It calls for a much higher level of lesson preparation from the teacher. If you think of a traditional lesson, the teacher just knows. Mathematics textbook, page 42, on we go. This is much more about saying, how am I going to create a learning environment that will test a child's knowledge of poetry and what is a good Elizabethan sonnet, and how will I make that relevant to the children? So let's start with some cool rap music that's being played now and then build from that back into Shakespearean poetic structures. And that calls for incredible skill and planning. So we're looking for exceptional teachers.
Okay, so let's talk about where you're looking to find them. I'm interested in your own background. Andy, have you done the years of the traditional schooling? Turn to page 42, chapter 3, exercise 5. What's your own background?
Yes, so I went to a traditional boys' private school in the southern suburbs. I'm sure you can work out that's one of 3 or 4. Studied at UCT, spent most of my time in South African education, then became involved with the International School of Hout Bay and was the founder principal there, built that campus. And that was my window into the world of the international baccalaureate curriculum. I then, from being principal of that school, became principal of a school in Dubai and then in the Bahamas, and have now decided to return back to South Africa. This is a wonderful opportunity to start a new school with a blank canvas, and we're having the most fantastic conversation. Should we have uniforms? What sports should we play? Should we have a prize giving? What kind of ceremonies do we have? What do we affirm? And there are all those questions which we can have. And we're wanting to really engage with our school community as we answer those questions. Because how do we prepare young people to succeed in the world of the future? What knowledge and skills and competencies and values of character will they need to have to be successful people who are going to start their careers in 2035?
It feels like a long way off, but it's really just around the corner at the rate at which time is moving.
Well, children coming into kindergarten reception are going to graduate from school in 2033, 2034. So boy, oh boy, we're going to need digital data harvesters then.
Yeah. Just for those who might have joined us late to the conversation, we're talking about the Green School, which is set to open in the Paarl Franschhoek Valley next year, January. They'll have their first intake, and we'll share some details with you about how you find out more if you're interested in being part of that class. But with me in studio, you've been hearing from Andy Wood, who's the principal of the school, from Alba Brunt, who is the South African parent whose experience at the Green School in Bali really sparked the idea of getting it started here in South Africa, and from Chris Thompson, who's the current head of the Green School in Bali. Amanda on the WhatsApp line saying that school almost makes me want to change my mind about not having children. Thanks, Amanda. Interesting and challenging question from someone on the WhatsApp line. And Chris, I think I need to direct this to you. The person says, I love the sound of this, but I would be worried about the future prospects in the tertiary education system. Do many of the Bali kids go back into the traditional system for university, or do they tend to be largely self-starters?
Yeah, so the goal of the school is not to get the children into university. What we do is it's open for any path. So do they want to do a gap year? Do they want to do an internship? Do they want to start their own business? Do they want to go to university? Now, most of the students do go on to university. And what has been amazing is Green School's only been around for 10 years, and this was always a big question for parents. Well, I love it, and my kids are happy, and they're having an amazing time, but I want them to go to university. Well, we have a 100% acceptance rates for our children going to university, and they're getting into the top universities around the world, in the United States, in Australia, in Europe. So it has not been any barrier to them doing it. So I think it's wonderful that you can have an education system where you're having fun, you're engaged, you're learning, you're excited about going to school each day, and that path of going forward is a continuation of it, rather than the idea where most kids just want to get done with their school, get on to university, and then get out into the working world, which I think is really sad.
It's fascinating. You're talking about embedding a true love of learning and of exploration and of curiosity, which would then seem like a natural pathway into further studies in a slightly more a different environment, obviously, until such time as there's a green university. Maybe you want to put that on the radar for 10 years from now, Alba. Let's just, a couple of more questions coming in from listeners. A lot of them asking the same question is where do we find out more, and how do we get onto that list to explore the possibility of coming into the school community? You've got an open day happening this coming Friday, Alba.
Yes, we've got a launch function for Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, for 6 o'clock. Between 6 and 7 we'll have some speeches, but there's a little bit of an exhibition around what it is that we're doing, the pedagogy, the curriculum, the architecture, the landscape, and all of that. So anyone that wants to come can find a link to the event on our Facebook page and our Instagram, Green School South Africa. And yes, and then we're launching our applications on Friday. So from Friday onwards, you can apply to become part of the school.
Yeah.
So applications open on Friday?
Yes.
Okay. A question from a parent asking whether you are geared up to be able to take kids with learning disabilities and challenges. Is that something that's I'm sure been discussed in the lead up to the opening?
Yes, we are. We would assess each child's needs and put them through a really thorough assessment to ensure that we're able to address those needs. Mm-hmm. And obviously, no school can address every single child's educational needs, so we do it on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. Yes, we are an inclusive school. The Green School Bali's had some phenomenal successes with children who face learning challenges, and a big part of that is a good diagnosis, a supportive family, individual education plans that are carefully crafted for each child, which makes the learning experience much richer for both the teacher and the student. So on a case-by-case basis, we'll very carefully assess each of those children to ensure that we're able to maximize their opportunities and, to be honest, where we cannot meet those children's needs and where we can.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we've got time to squeeze in a question that's come in as a voice note. I'm just going to ask you all to have your headphones on so that you can listen to the question. Let's hear that.
Pippa, I'm listening with interest because I've got education on my mind with my young carer's daughter, who's 7 years old, having joined her from Malawi. And I just wondered if this Green School has anything in common with the Waldorf School, and also whether the systems that the Green School wants to put into place could be in rural schools and in our township schools, so that it's not just sort of remote areas where this could be happening. Love your show.
Thank you so much. So I can partly answer part of that question because my own kids were Waldorf schooled in their kindergarten days. There are a lot of similarities in the pedagogy that you're talking about here, and the curiosity and the love of learning and the way of approaching it there. But also some differences. I don't know if you want to respond to that part of it first, Andy. Oh,
well,
Chris,
just on the first part. So many of the teachers who started at Green School came from Waldorf Steiner backgrounds, but also Montessori backgrounds and other. There's a lot of commonality between the early learning programs in terms of experiential learning, inquiry-based learning, play-based learning, and so yes, there is a lot of crossover. But the learning model and curriculum of Green School is different. There are differences to it, but they're not significant in the context of her question and things like that.
Okay, thanks. The second part is a tough one. I mean, can this be replicated? Is that the vision, Andy and Albert, that we start in Paarl and maybe...
Education, it could be replicated. The challenge is to find the funding for such a project, and you'd have to find donor funding or grant funding for that purpose. It's a fantastic concept. So you need to find funding, and then to find teachers and school leaders who are passionate about educating the whole child and are willing to take a real quantum leap in terms of how do we go about preparing and delivering lessons? What will success look like? How will we assess children? So a much smaller focus on tests and scores and a much higher focus on saying what competencies do we need? How will we know that a child has mastered these scientific concepts, and how would they demonstrate that? So a far more sophisticated approach to assessment and evidencing that.
If you're sitting in your car nodding your head emphatically and wishing you'd been at that kind of school, well, remember that applications open on Friday for the Green School Essay. You can email Andy on head@greenschoolessay.co.za or visit them on their Facebook and Instagram pages, Green School South Africa. If you'd like to know more about the school or more about the opening launch functions on Friday, etc., those are your points of contact. Been an absolute delight to hear that this vision is coming to fruition. Albert, congratulations on the hard work and making it possible. Thanks for coming back into studio to share the story with us. And Chris and Andy, good luck to you. May the green roots give rise to beautiful green shoots going forward.
Thank you so much, Pippa.
Great, thank you.